one port 27017.
Okay.
We try to connect it to the Mongo server using either Mongoose or maybe Mongo client.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll try to retrieve the uh, documents, whatever we have created in the Mongo Express UI. Using the Mongo Express UI, we would have been creating some collection and there would be some documents in it. So we'll
No.
try to, okay.
Okay.
And now we have to ensure that all the, I mean, maybe not three, but the Mongo network and the Mongo container and our Express or the node container both should run at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and they should share the same network so that we can actually see the documents the in a particular browser or both.
Exactly. So ideally, like initially what we try to do is like, so we'll create a, since this is like on our host machine itself, like we are running all these containers on our host machines. So what we would like to do is like, so initially we'll be creating a network. Okay. So bridge network. And once you create this bridge network, like, so you'll start the MongoDB container with necessary parameters. Like, so any, so you can, based on the documentation, like, so doc from the Docker Hub. So you can actually start this MongoDB container on the port, like, so it will start on 2107 or some other port, like, and this MongoDB container, so it should be when you are actually running this container, so you need to attach it to the network like which we created. Okay. So after that, like what we'll be doing is like, so we'll also start this MongoDB Express connection, Express container. So using all the required information, like so all the host names and all that stuff, like so in order to connect with the MongoDB container here, like what we need to do, so we can simply connect with the container name, like MongoDB container name. So from the Mongo Express. So in order to do that, like what we need to do, so even this particular container, like the Mongo Express container, so it is supposed to be attached to the same network. So same network to which like MongoDB container is attached. Okay. So both MongoDB as well as like MongoDB Express, they share the same container. So after that, like, so I asked you to create like a small JS file, like here, a bit of miscommunication from my side. So even I expected this JS file to be running in the Node.js container. Okay. So you'll create a Docker file and then you'll copy this particular Node.js file onto this particular container, like so the Node.js container. So and when you start this container, so you'll also use the network option and connect it to the same network to which like MongoDB is connected. Okay. So this way, like we'll have the communication between all the three containers. Okay. And so when you're actually communicating with, so one of the, I think like Karthik, so in his example, he showed like he's using localhost at the MongoDB connection string when he's specifying the MongoDB connection string. So he's actually using localhost and the port number is 2107 or something like that. Okay. So localhost here, it doesn't work. So here, like instead of localhost, you need to provide the container name, like MongoDB container name, which is the default host name.
And a network IP address is also worked on.
Yeah, network IP address also works, but the problem is, so usually like these network IP addresses, they are not fixed, right, Tarun? So when you stop the container or when you delete the container and restart the container, so you cannot actually guarantee that like, so you'll be providing the same, you'll be getting the same IP address.
Okay.
Okay. So that is the reason why like it is always better to go with these host names, okay, instead of going with these IP addresses. So that even when you're actually dealing with these things like so the real-time production environment, so you don't actually try to prefer these IP addresses, right? So
Yes.
you'll have this IP address mapped to a DNS entry, and then you'll be using this DNS entry. So that is the reason why like I don't actually prefer to use this network IP address. Okay. So whenever like there is a change in the IP address, so again like you need to make a change across the board. Like, but if it is like a
Yes.
container name, so the container name is always like it can be fixed. Like so you'll have all these container names in the you'll have all these commands in a deployment script or somewhere, right? So you'll have the same content. You can make sure that like you'll have all the same container name all the time.
Okay.
Okay. So that is the approach like which I would take. So Preeti and Karthik, like I think like so you guys got like an issue. So can you just share like what's the issue like you guys got?
No, just now resolve the issue on So you mentioned right while you're giving the session, so I tried. So here the log of the container, this is the
Okay.
Node.js container.
Mm.
So now we are able to check. So I did a console log here. So
Okay.
the container got run and it got exited.
Okay, so the container got started and it got exited, right? Okay. So then
Yeah.
how did you make it like to run in the background? Okay, so even now, so it is actually running and then it is getting killed in the background, right?
Yeah, so the change that have made is like earlier we used here localhost,
Localhost.
here I replaced with the container name.
Yeah, so that is the thing. So as Tarun was mentioning, so there like you can also use this MongoDB network IP address, but it is not actually suggestible. So if you have like IP addresses provided, so the problem is like you need to change it like all the time. Okay, so that's the reason why like I prefer to go ahead with like host names.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so this is all about the assignment. So what's the difficulty level like which you observed here? Like, so how difficult did you feel? Like, so you're able to, so first thing, like, so you need to create a network. So the second command is like, so you need to run this particular container, Docker container, right? MongoDB container, and then specify the network option. The third thing is like you need to start the MongoDB Express container using a separate command. And the fourth thing is like, so you need to copy the content. Like, so you have the Docker file, let's assume, and you need to run this Node.js container, like customized Node.js container. All right. So how many commands like altogether like we are running here? Like if you see. So it is almost like we are running like 4 to 5 commands, right? So in order to create this environment, like so basically Node.js application communicating with this MongoDB, and then to use like MongoDB Express as a supporting GUI kind of thing to interact with the MongoDB. So you have to run like almost like 4 to 5 commands, right? Everyone, like, do you agree with me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So in order to reduce the complexity, so and in order to deal with like multiple containers at a time, so this is where like the Docker Composite comes into picture. Okay. So today like we'll look into this Docker Compose. So before that, like I would like to share a cheat sheet again for the Docker Compose.
Now, what small doubt
Yeah.
before that.
Yeah.
So similar to what you said, like I did same thing. Like I used a Node image. I tried to up Node application in localhost 49160. It's up and running, and then I created a Docker network, and I
You
think last
attach.
you mentioned provide
Attach.
attach, right? So I
Yeah.
did that, but after that, when I tried to use a Mongo, what is a Mongo related things, I'm not sure exactly. So I used I copied some of the code from a Mongo application. So when I do that, like somehow I'm not getting any error while doing the build process. And my node also stopping, like container also stopping. So how can I inspect like where I'm getting the error? Like in somewhere, I think in my
So
code.
your node container, it is getting started and then it is getting killed, right? Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is the problem like even Karthik was facing. So basically like how you're actually starting this container. So you're just executing this particular app, right? So maybe like your command is something like ngserve, not even ngserve, you're just starting like node and then you're calling this JavaScript file, right?
Um.
In the entry point or command.
Yeah. Yeah. In the entry point.
So in your case, so this is not an issue, but you can actually see the output like Docker inspect logs, Docker inspect. So you can just provide the container ready. So it will give you like all the console. Okay, so just that was the issue like Karthik is also facing. So
Okay.
so node, he gave this command like node, and then so he executed something like the program like server.js or something like that. So what
Yeah.
happened? So here the container got started, and then the command which was provided in the Docker file, it got executed like node, and then the command got executed. And once this command is executed, you're not actually stopping it. Like, so you're not running it in the forever, like, right? So what happens? So in this case, what is happening is, so once the program is successfully executed, so its job is done. The container's job is actually done. So that is the job which you gave, right? So execute this particular program. So that is the option like which you provided in the Docker file. So once that execution is done, so the container, it gets killed automatically. So in order to solve that, like what you need to do is like, so you need to run this particular thing, like, so in the background, like, or forever, something like that. So
like bash, bin bash or something.
yeah, so either like you can start like bin bash, or so I can actually show you something. So this is the problem like which I faced. SH file, yeah. So if you remember, like, so in one of my Docker files, so I am starting this startup.sh, like I'm executing in the entry point, I'm executing sh and then startup.sh, if you remember. Okay. So
Yeah.
if you see the content of my, uh, so my content of this particular file, so here, like you can just specify in the shell file, you can specify node and then whatever the command like you wanted to give. Okay.
Okay.
So node and then so server.js or something like that, and you can specify this option like tail minus of /dev /null, or there are like multiple options. So if you do a quick Google, so you'll see like, so how to run this container forever or something like that. Okay, so you can use like infinite while loop or something like that.
Yeah. I think so.
And
When I'm running the node and try to establish a connection, that at the time worked, but after I'm adding a MongoDB related code, so then my Node.js application stopping, I'm not able to establish that connection. So maybe I'll check how.
okay. And another thing, like what you guys are actually doing is, so as my assumption is something like this, like, so you'll be creating a server kind of thing, okay? So like a web API kind of thing, API kind of thing. So, but I believe like, so Karthik, like you didn't actually do that, right? So you're simply executing, creating a Node.js and JS file, and then so you're doing like MongoDB execution, right?
Anna, can you repeat again, Anna?
I mean, so did you actually start this node server, like, or you're simply executing a JS file, like, so which has the code
No,
to
actually I created a from Node pack. First of all, from Node I have taken I copied
yeah,
the
yeah.
package.
Not about the
Then
Docker file, but I'm asking about the server.js file, like the JS file which you took. So is this like an web server kind of application, or is it just like, so you're just connecting to the MongoDB and doing some console?
just connecting to the MongoDB using Mongo client and displaying the collection documents in the console.
Okay, okay. Yeah. So, so if you start it as an HTTP server, so obviously like, so it will run forever in the background, like, so it will be listening to any client request or something like that. So you can actually try this option too. Okay. So my intention is like, you will be creating a HTTP server kind of thing. Okay. So just give it a try.
Yeah.
So everyone is clear, right? So I apologize. Like, so even from my side, like, so the requirement is not actually clear. Okay. So any other questions?
To add a point, I think so. I think no way we can't I don't think we can communicate directly from simple JS file to Docker, right?
So
I'm guessing.
using a simple JS file to Docker.
Yeah.
I didn't actually understand your question. So
I mean, so
where is this JS file actually present?
in my local.
So on your host machine, right?
Yeah.
So from the host machine, like you want to connect to Docker,
Some API.
some API, like, yeah, you can actually connect to the API. So let's say like if I want to connect to this particular API, like MongoDB directly, like, so I don't want to run this particular JS file inside a container. So if you're actually trying to accomplish this requirement, so the requirement something like this, okay. So in this requirement, like I asked you to create like two different containers, and the third one I just asked you to create like a small JS file. But here,
Yeah.
like my inner intention was something like this. So I wanted you to create like a JS file, containerized JS file. But okay, so in this point, like I asked you to create a small JS file and then communicate with MongoDB, right? So if you want to do this, so what you need to do, so you have this MongoDB container, right? So this MongoDB container, so we have the port exposing, right? So you can expose the port like onto the host machine, something like using -p or -P. So that way, like once the port is exposed to the host machine, so you'll be able to communicate. So it's just like TCP or HTTP protocols only, right?
Got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Logbox also, just now I understand like React app doesn't not Dockerized, that's Dockerized, but API and all servers Dockerized. So I think so they're also exposing the ports, and we are using those ports to communicate.
Exactly. So if you don't want to expose, so on our Friday session, what we did is like, so we never expose this MongoDB port to external world. Okay. So we never use like -p option, right? And in that case, like in order to establish the communication between this MongoDB container and then Mongo Express container, what we did, so we created a bridge network, and then we added both of these containers to the bridge network, the one which we created. So when they are in the same network, so obviously like you can connect with the host name, like host name is nothing but like the Docker container name.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So ideally, like what we do is like, so any of these servers like Kafka or any of these database servers of internal databases, so which is used for communication between like multiple services, we don't prefer to expose them to the external world. Okay. So we just like create a network and then assign all these containers to the same network so that like they can have seamless connectivity. Okay, so any other questions?
I'm good.
Okay. So, so we saw the difficulty with this particular approach. So in order to run this particular stuff, like, so we had to create a network, and then we need to run this MongoDB container, one command, like two commands. And then this is the third command, and you need to Dockerize this file. And then after Dockerizing, like you need to run this particular image, right? So almost like 4 to 5 commands, like you're supposed to do. Right, so you need to do like execute like 4 to 5 commands, like. So in order to simplify that, like, so this is where like the Docker Compose it comes into picture. Like Docker Compose is nothing but like, so this is again like another software. It by default like it comes with Docker, um, Docker. So in the Docker Compose, the main concept is something like this. So you'll have an AML file created. Like AML is nothing but like it is a latest format. Like so, just like JSON, XML formats. Like AML is the latest format. Like through which like we can actually create like some of this content. Okay. So what is happening in this? So how this Docker AML is actually helping us out? So we'll see that. Okay. So you remember this scenario, like we'll proceed with the same scenario, like creating a MongoDB container, MongoDB Express, and then a small JS file. So initially, like what we need to do is like, so we need to create an AML file, and then so you need to specify the version, like so the version of the Docker Compose, like which you wanted to use. Okay. So in order to check like what is the version that is actually installed, it's like Docker Compose. Okay, so I have like Docker Compose installed. Okay, so how this Docker file is actually interpreted, like so this actually denotes the interpretation of this Docker file. Okay, so there are like multiple versions, 2.1, 3.1, and then other stuff, like so Docker Compose versions. So you can actually see, so previously it was like 1, which was actually deprecated, and then we have like version 2, and then the latest one is like version 3. So the Docker Compose. So basically, it has something called as services. So I was actually sharing you this particular cheat sheet, right? So from this, like, we'll actually proceed. So this is a basic example of a Docker compose file. So basically, like, you'll create something called as a docker-compose.yml file. And initially, like, you'll specify the version. So in our case, like, the latest version is 3. I'm just using this latest version 3. Services. So services are nothing but, like, so you'll be creating like multiple containers and stuff, right? So each container, so it can be considered as like a one service. Okay, so I'm just specifying this is service. So inside this services, like, I'm just specifying like web. So this is my container name, and I need to specify the context, right? So for example, like, let's take this scenario, like, this is my services, and I'm just creating like MongoDB and then MongoDB Express. Okay. So in order to start both these containers like Mongo and Mongo Express, so how many commands we need? So we need to create a network, and then we need to run this MongoDB container too, and then you need to run this MongoDB Express container. So you're just providing like 3 different commands. So here in this case, so what I'm saying is like, this is just like a specification. So inside the services, like, what I would like to do. So I would like to create a container by name Mongo. Okay. So what would be the source of this container? Okay. So I want to build this particular container from an image. So which image like you would like to use? So I would like to use Mongo. So how does this actually pick? Like, so again, like, when you specify this image and then this image name, so what this Docker file actually does is like, so again, like, so the Docker engine, what it does is like, so it will parse this file and then it will try to identify, okay, so do we have like any image by name Mongo in the public registry or any private registries that are attached to the current shell? Okay. So if it finds like any, so if it finds any image by name like Mongo in the Docker Compose, I mean Docker Hub or any private registries, so it will use that particular image. So it will do a pull. Okay. So the restart always, like, so we are just specifying like whenever we start this container, always restart it. Okay. And then, so if you remember, like, we were actually providing some of these commands like Docker. So what's the command to? So we saw environment variables, right? So you need to specify some of these environmental variables. So for example, like, if you want to override the default username and password, okay. So usually, like, so these are specific to the MongoDB itself. So these are commands, like, so these are the environment variables, so which we are actually using. So by default, like, if you don't specify any username and password, like for the MongoDB, so it is just like no authentication or something like that, right? So if you want to override this particular username, so you need to provide this environment variable. So same way, like, you are passing this password, okay? So if you remember, like, so for the same command, like, if I wanted to start this MongoDB container, so I had to give something like this. So control. So if you see, so this is MongoDB Express command, right? So I have to give like, so I need to specify this hyphen network, and then so -e is to specify the environment variable. So if I have any environment variable, so I need to provide it via like -e. So and then port numbers via like -p option, right? So here in this case, like, so you can simply specify something like this. So environment variable. So you can pass an array of environment variables, something like this. Okay. So this is just for my MongoDB container. The same way, like, at the same time, like, I would also like to start like MongoDB Express container. Okay. And this is the name I wanted to give for my container, like Mongo Express container. So which image like I want to use? So I want to use this Mongo Express. Okay. So again, like, restart always. So this is an optional parameter, some of them. So I'm just saying like restart always, like, again port. So Mongo Express. So we don't want to expose MongoDB to the external world. So even in our Friday example, like we were not exposing this MongoDB container to the external world, but we are connecting to this MongoDB via MongoDB Express, right? And this MongoDB Express is exposed via 8081. So if you see these two commands, so it is almost same. So if you see these commands like MongoDB Express, so which image I'm using? I'm using this Mongo Express image. Okay. So ports, what ports I'm exposing? I'm exposing like -p here, like I'm using like -p option 8081 and 8081. Like this is my host machine and this is my container. And then I'm passing few environment variables. So MongoDB server. So I'm just passing example Mongo. Since my MongoDB container name is example Mongo. So I'm just specifying like this as example Mongo. So here like I'm using MongoDB URL, something like this. Okay, so MongoDB. So this is the connection string for MongoDB. Okay, root is nothing but like my MongoDB username. And then example is nothing but the password. And I'll come back to this. So and then the port number on which like MongoDB is exposed. Okay. So just ignore this. So this is my host name. Like, what is the host name that I should provide here? Like now.
Mongo.
So it is Mongo, right? So I should actually provide Mongo. So I'll execute this. Let's see if I have. So I don't have like any MongoDB containers running, right? So in the command to use this, make use of this Docker compose file and then to create these containers is Docker compose up. Okay. So if you want to start the container, so you need to do like Docker -compose up. So if you do this, so you can see like, so you can see like after doing this Docker compose up, so what it is doing, like it is creating recreating Docker Kubernetes Mongo Express one. So initially what it is actually trying to do is, so it is trying to create a network for us. Okay. So instead of we creating a network like bridge network and then so making use of it, like so this Docker compose itself, like it is actually creating a network for us. Let's see, let's inspect Docker network. Docker network. Yes. So you can actually see this is the network which was created. Okay. So once this is actually created, we'll also see if these containers are attached to this particular network. So this is my 723, right? Docker, yes. So you can actually see Docker. Right. So you can see it is actually this network like Docker Kubernetes default. So this container is attached to this network. The same way like MongoDB is also attached. Okay. So I'll just browse this. So you can see this, like, so I'm able to connect to this Docker, this thing, like, so, okay. So I'm able to connect to this Express. So how many commands like did we execute now? Previously, like how many commands and now how many commands like did we execute? So now it is a single command, right? So we were able to create this Docker compose file and we gave all those instructions which we wanted. And then so with simple command like Docker compose up, like you're able to up this all these containers, like related containers. Right? So this is where like Docker Compose it comes into picture and it makes the life of a developer easy. Okay. So do you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you are not required to create any networks, and then you are not required to attach them to each of these containers and all that stuff, right? So by simply specifying these things, let's say you are able to create some. So can someone share your Node.js example, like your Node.js Docker file? So I'll also add it to this demo. So anyone sharing with me?
Add it. Just send.
Okay. Also send your JS file. I mean,
JS file. Okay. With just node. What is
yours it is looking complex for me to do. So you added like a lot more stuff, right? So pretty like you share it to me. Like so yours is very simple. Or anyone like so. I think could be you documented it. Yes. So this is the Docker file, right? So this is the Docker file. This is the JS file, app.js. Okay. So till now, like what we saw, so we in these examples, like we saw, we were able to create an image directly. We were getting this image directly from the Docker Hub or some registry, right? So now if I would like to build an image from my Docker file, okay, so what I need to do? So I want to name this container as Pavan no, and I want to build this from so and so file, like, okay. So in order to do that, like, so there is something called as build. So if you see this, so this is the build. So if when you want to build an image from a context, like a specific location or something like that, okay. So you can use like context, the current directory. Build dot. And so if I want to give like the Docker file, so my Docker file is in the current location. Okay. So and what else I would like to do? So I want to, so this is not a server, right? So since this is not a server, I think like I cannot expose this on a port. Okay, so anyhow, like so I don't want to expose it on a port. So here like Preeti is using like Mongo example. So I think like I need to change this file. So I should use something like, what should be the host name?
Mongo.
Yeah, so it is Mongo. So I should actually provide this as Mongo. Simpi, like you created this collection, right?
Yes.
So just give me those instructions. Like, so what's the collection name? So this is the database, right? So the database.
Preeti underscore DB.
P underscore DB. And then collection name is Preeti underscore collection. Right? And then any specific documents you mentioned?
Yeah. I just added some sample docs there.
Okay, so you just added. So this is my Docker compose file. So let me execute this. This Docker file. So I think like some of these options were removed. But you can actually see, so it is actually building Pavan now. Okay, so in the current directory itself, like it is actually taking. So we'll see what it is actually. Now let me execute this Docker. Yes. So it got started and it got exited. Okay, so it is saying like it is an unauthorized. So you can see these errors, right? Okay. So when I executed this log, so Prithvi, you're asking me, so how do I actually check whether my code got executed successfully or not? Like, so you can use like Docker logs. So if you have like console, so you can use Docker logs and then the container ID. So if I see the logs, so I'm able to see that this is actually throwing an issue, like this particular JS file. It is throwing an issue, and that is because so we didn't actually provide any authentication options, but in our compose file what we did, like we have this username and then password, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just replace this with this thing. Okay. So it got started. Let me let's see. So if you see this thing, so a new container is not created, like it is using this existing old container. So it is trying to start make use of this old container itself, right? So I'll just provide this restart always option over here. So if you see these logs, so for this container, so it is starting, and then but for this container, you can see like this is actually recreating. Okay, since I have this option of restart always. Okay, now let me execute this Docker. So you can see like these containers, like they didn't actually restart. Okay, but this container, so it got restarted. Okay. So this is the one. Docker. So it is not actually taking this latest file. So even though like I changed my latest file app.js file, so it is not actually taking that file, because so if you see the Docker file like that Preeti provided me, so it is using like copy app.js to this particular container, right, into that image. So since this image is already present, so it is not actually trying to recreate this image. Like, so it is not trying to rebuild it. So it is trying to use the existing image. So I made some changes in this app.js file, right? So they needs to be reflected. So in order to make them reflected, so I need to delete this image. So you got it. Again, like the image, it will be created. Now let's see this Docker PS. So you can see. So these two documents like which I added. So you're able to see them, right? So what did we do? So simply like what I did is like, so I created a Docker file and then I copied. So the Docker file itself, it is taking care of copying all the code, my code into that image. So in the Docker Compose, I simply created a new item like new service entry called as like Pavan node. So this is my name like which I wanted to give. And then so I'm just specifying like build. So in the build, so I'm just specifying the context. So in the current directory itself, like take this Docker file. Okay. So restart, like I always wanted to restart this. So that like, so you can see the difference between the restart always. Like, so here in this case, so I removed this restart always. So what is happening? So when it is actually restarting, so it is creating a new container all the time. Like, but here, so it is using the existing container. So it is not restarting, creating a new container. Okay. So if it is like a web application, so this is not a web application. So simply this is a simple JavaScript file which actually connects to the MongoDB and then so it is printing all the documents, right? So if it is like a web application like Node server or Express server running, so you can also expose these ports and then you can interact to it with it via the local host and then the port exposed. So any questions with this example?
So if you make some changes to the app.js, the changes are not getting reflected, right? But if we use the Docker build command, so whenever the build is happening, it will recreate the changes, right? So that is not happening in case of Compose.
Exactly. So in case of Compose, like it is not happening, right? So there is some option, there will be some option, Docker Compose always build image. So so you can actually use this option. So I will, so you can actually specify like hyphen build. So it will create like build all those images, like so build images before starting the container. Okay.
Okay.
And another thing like what I would like to share, I just forgot. Yeah. Any other questions like anyone else? So I think like it is already 4:30, right? So let me know if you have any questions so we can discuss further on this.
So it is defaultly creating the networks for the services that we have written, right? So whatever services we have in this folder of services, so the Docker Compose will create a network between those.
Yeah, so it will create a network for all of those. So if you see, um, the default network that was created is Docker network ls. Okay, so this is the default network that got created, right? Docker. So this is the node image. I mean, this is the container. So let's inspect this. Docker inspect. So you can see like even this container, so it is attached with this network like Docker Kubernetes default. Okay. So another thing like what we can actually do is, so here like you're actually copying the Docker file, right, Preeti? So you're actually copying the Docker file at the time of like building the image. So you can also use this option of volumes. Something like volumes. So the syntax for this is volumes. Want to like, so if you want to expose this current directory, so this is again an array. So if you want to specify like multiple volumes, so you can just specify. So volumes. So I'm just saying like map my current directory, like so wherever like this Docker compose file is actually present in the current Docker context. So take this Docker context, like current context, and then map that folder to this code folder. So instead of that, like I would like to. So in your Docker file, like where are you? This is your working directory, right? App. So what I will do is like instead of I'll just mount this particular volume. Okay. So my current directory to this user src app. Now let me rebuild this image. Cannot find module MongoDB. So let's get into this container and see why we are getting this error. So what did I do? So simply like I added this volumes option, like so I'm just doing like current directory to this user src app. Docker. Docker patch. So it is continuously running. So what might have happened is, so if you see this Docker file, so you're doing like npm install. Okay, but I now what I'm actually doing, so I'm just having all this, I'm just copying all this user src directory, like so replacing it with my folder, like I'm just volume, right? So what I'll actually do. So any suggestions like which you have? Did you understand the problem statement?
Yeah.
So it is continuously like, so it is trying to restart like, so another advantage like with Docker Compose is like, so it is continuously trying to restart this particular server. Like, so even though it is failing, okay, so it is trying to restart it again and again. Okay, so what I would like to do over here is, I will just copy this code somewhere like this. Okay. So I'll copy it to some folder like src. Okay. This is my volume. Now let's see. So this is my container, right? Docker attach this container.
Connect demo.
No, so it is what hand. Docker exec minus it /bin/bash. This container is still available. Okay, so bash is not actually present on this node container. So I just did like sh. Okay. So where are we? Like this is the working directory which Preeti specified in her file, like Docker file, user src app. So where did I try to copy my code into the src folder? cd dot dot. So this is the src folder. Let's see cd src ls. So you can see all my files. So they're actually present over here. So they got copied because like I did like a volume mount. Okay. So I can also specify the working directory over here. Work dir. So this I'll be specifying it as like /src. So if you have like Visual Studio and then appropriate plugin, so this Docker Compose file will be very easy. Like so you can actually you'll get like IntelliSense and then so you'll have all these commands. So it would be very easy. So let me exit this and then recreate this. So I need to do a quick Google. Okay. It needs to be an absolute path. So again, like it is actually saying the same problem, like because like it is trying to. So I just had this like src directory as my working directory, right? So I'm just trying to execute this app file. So if Preeti installed this npm MongoDB as global version, so then it would be easy. Like so I can just execute like this would not actually throw an exception, right? So you can just try this. So I need to delete this container and then I need to install it in -z. So does that solve this problem with me?
Think so, no?
So that is what it is happening, right? So it is not able to find this particular MongoDB module in this current directory.
Yeah, so I think globally will work.
Yeah, so you need to have this installed globally. So you can just try this sample. Okay. So any questions from today's session?
One question, like, so I think we can also mention our own networks, like say sales network or something. So you will cover that later, or?
Yeah, we'll actually cover this. So today, like we saw only the basic things. Like, so I explained you about this thing, like the building an app, not even complete one. Like, so using these arguments, like the Docker file and stuff. Okay. So we also saw these environments, and then we saw these ports and expose. Like it is similar to the expose like which we had in the Docker file. Okay. And if you want to override like any commands or entry points, so you remember like we overrided entry point and then commands at few points, right? So if you want to override this, like we'll see this in the action, okay?
Okay.
But we have a lot in this Docker composite. Tomorrow we'll cover some of them, like creating these networks and all that stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So any other questions?